I hope you are doing well and enjoying the Santali lessons. In the last lesson, we learned a lot about cases and pose positions. And today, we are going to dive deeper into animals, birds, and their body parts. Animals are a diverse group of multicellular organisms found all over the earth. Today, we will learn about some common animals, their body parts, and their actions. Animal is named Jiali and birds is named Chere in Santali. There are two categories of animals and two categories of birds. We found them around us. One is the pet animals and birds, and the other is the wild. The pet animal is named Asuljiali, and the pet bird is named Asulchare in Santali. The pet animals are Gai means cow, Dangra means bullock, Kada means buffalo, Marom means goat, Boda means he goat, Pathi means she goat, Bhidi means sheep, Seta means dog, Pusi means cat, Sadom means horse, Hathi means elephant, Sukri means hog, Oot means camel, Gadi means monkey, Chemeng means mongoose. Now let us make some sentences with the pet animals. Uni mitang gai menaya, which means he or she has a cow. Aleren baria dangra menakina, which means we have two bullocks. Unkuren punia kada menakwa, which means they have 4 male buffaloes. Now look at these sentences carefully one by one and observe them. In the first sentence, Uni mitang gai menaya, which means he or she has a cow. Here, Uni means he or she is a third person singular number possessive pronoun for animate. Mitang, which means a or one. Gai, which means cow. And Menaya, which means has. Here, Menaya is formed by adding the object marker ui and the finite verb marker a. The letter o is omitted from Menaa for the rule by syncope. In the second sentence, Aleren baria dangra menakina, which means we have 2 bullocks. Here, Alerens means we. It is the first person plural number possessive pronoun for animate. Baria dangra, which means 2 bullocks. Mela, which means have. Keen is the object marker of baria dangra. A is the finite verb marker. In the third sentence, Unkuran punia kada menakwa, which means they have 4 male buffaloes. Here, Unkuran, which means they. It is the third person plural number possessive pronoun for animate. Punia kada, which means 4 male buffaloes. Mena, which means have. Ko is the object marker of Punia kada. Au is a glide which appears for combining 2 vowels o plus a, and a is the finite verb marker. In this way, koa formed. Now we learn about the wild animals. The wild animals are Taru, which means tiger, Kul, which means lion, Bana, which means bear, Sarom, which means deer, Tuyu, which means jackal, Bir Sukri, which means wild boar, Hadu, which means monkey, Kulai, which means hare, Tod, which means squirrel, Bing, which means snake, Tayan, which means crocodile, Chatra, which means leopard, Dahati, which means hippopotamus, giraffe, which means giraffe. Now let us make some sentences with the wild animals. Ale mitang tarub le nyel kedia, which means we saw a tiger. Unku kul nyel ko san akana, which means they have gone to see a lion. Seta tuyu ko laga ket kua, which means the dog chased the jackals. Now look at these sentences carefully one by one and observe them. In the first sentence, Ale mitang tarub le nyel kedia, which means we saw a tiger. Here, Ale, which means we, mitang tarub, which means a tiger. Le is the subject marker of Ale. Nyel, which means saw. Ked is the past indefinite tense marker. A is the third person singular number object marker of tarub. And ui is a glide that appears for the combination of a plus a. The next letter a is the finite verb marker. In this way, kedia is formed. In the second sentence, unku kulnyel ko san akana, which means they have gone to see a lion. Here's unku, which means they, kul, which means lion, nyal, which means see. Ko is the subject marker of third person plural number unku. San, which means go. Akana is the present perfect tense marker. So, san akana, which means have gone. In the third sentence, Seta tuyu ko laga ke kua, which means the dog chased the jackals. Here, Seta, which means dog, tuyu, which means jackal, ko is the subject marker of third person plural number Seta. Laga, which means chased. Ked is the past indefinite tense marker. Ko is the object marker of third person plural number tuyu. Au is a glide which appears for combining two vowels o plus a. And a is the finite verb marker. In this way, koa is formed. So, lagake, which means chased. Now, we learned about the body parts of animal. Those are chylom, which means tail, phadi, which means thigh, dereng, which means horn, jata, which means mane, sur, which means trunk, khura, which means hoof, and dochong, which means hump. Now, let us make some sentences with the body parts of animals. Tarub are kula chylom do jilinga, which means the tail of tiger and lion are long. Dereng khon naki ko benawa, which means the comb is made of horn. Hutia sur menaa, which means the elephant has a trunk. Now look at these sentences carefully, one by one, and observe them. In the first sentence, Tarub are kula chylom do jiliya, which means the tail of tiger and lion are long. Here, Tarub, which means tiger, ar, which means and, kul, which means lion. A is the possessive singular marker of inanimate. Chylom, which means tail. Do is an emphatic particle. Jiling, which means long. A is the finite verb marker. In the second sentence, dereng khon naki ko benawa, which means the comb is made of horn. Here, dereng, which means horn, khon, which means of, naki, which means comb. Ko is the subject marker of third person plural number naki. Benao, which means make. A is the finite verb marker. In the third sentence, hatia sur menaa, which means the elephant has a trunk. Here, hati, which means elephant, is a possessive noun of inanimate. Sur, which means trunk. Mena'a, which means has. Now, let's take a look at some common birds. Birds are called chere in Santali. We found two types of birds. One is the house birds and the other is the wild bird. House birds are Sim, which means hen, Miru, which means parrot, Gede, which means duck, Paura, which means pigeon, Ghaura, which means sparrow, and Mara, which means peacock. Now, let us make some sentences with the house birds. Uni rin amda sim menakwa, which means he has many hens. Unkin mitang mirukin asul akadia, which means they too have pet parrot. Gede pukri reko paira kana, which means the ducks are swimming in the pond. Now look at these sentences carefully one by one and observe them. In the first sentence, Uni rin amda sim menakwa, which means he has many hens. Here, Uni, which means he. Rin is a possessive plural marker of animate. Amda, which means many. Sim, which means hen. Mena, which means has. Ko is the object marker of sim. Au is a glide which appears for combining two vowels o plus a, and a is the finite verb marker. In this way, koa is formed. In the second sentence, unkin miteng mirukin asul akadia, which means they too have pet parrot. Here's unkin, which means they too. Miteng, which means a. Miru, which means parrot. Kin is the subject marker of third person dual number unkin. Asul, which means pet. Akad is the present perfect tense marker. A is the object marker of third person singular number miru. Ui is a glide which appears for combining two vowels a plus a, and a is the finite verb marker. In this way, akadia is formed. In the third sentence, Gede pukri reko paira kana, which means the ducks are swimming in the pond. Here, Gede, which means duck. Pukri, which means pond. Re, which means in. It is a postposition. Ko is the subject marker of third person plural number Gede. Paira, which means swim. Kana is a present continuous tense marker. So, paira kana, which means swimming. Next, we learn about wild birds. The wild birds are potang, which means dove. Kuili, which means cuckoo. Kahu, which means crow. Kurit, which means eagle. Gidi, which means vulture. Pajhar, which means hawk. Kikir, which means kingfisher. Sugi, which means magpie robin. Kokor, which means owl. Dipchui, which means drongo. Lipi, which means swallow. Titri, which means grey jungle fowl. Kisni, which means martin. Hissi, which means by a weaver. Kok, which means heron. Gudri, which means quail. Utchere, which means ostrich. Now let us make some sentences with the wild birds. Kuili kahu tukureko pelea, which means the cuckoo lay eggs in the crow's nest. Kurit simbusa e halo kedia, which means an eagle snatched away a chick. Gidi sermareko murdero a, which means the vulture fly around in the sky. Now look at these sentences carefully one by one and observe them. In the first sentence, Kuili kahutukare ko bilia, which means the cuckoo lay eggs in the crow's nest. Here's Kuili, which means cuckoo, kahu, which means crow, tuka, which means nest, re, which means in. It is a postposition. Ko is the subject marker of third person plural number Kuili. Bili, which means lay eggs. Ui is a glide which appears for combining two vowels e plus a, and a is the finite verb marker. In this way, bilia is formed. In the second sentence, kurid sin busa e halo kedea, which means an eagle snatched away a chick. Here, kurid, which means eagle, sin busa, which means chick, e is the subject marker of kurid. Halo, which means snatch away, ked is the past indefinite tense marker, e is the object marker of simbusa, and ui is a glide that appears for the combination of e plus a. The next letter a is the finite verb marker. In this way, kedia is formed. In the third sentence, Gidi sermareko madroa, which means the vulture fly around in the sky. Here, Gidi, which means vulture, serma, which means sky, re, which means in. It is a postposition. Ko is the subject marker of Gidi. Madro means fly around. O is the intransitive verb marker, and a is the finite verb marker. Now we learned about the body parts of birds. Those are eel, which means feather, fokrak, which means wings, rama, which means nail, thonta, which means beak, hotok, which means throat, and chupi, which means tail. Now let us make some sentences with the body parts of birds. Mara eel adi moj neloa, which means the feather of peacock looks very beautiful. Ut chedea hoto jilinya, which means the throat of the ostrich is long. Kurida rama adi lasera, which means the talon of the eagle is very sharp. Now look at these sentences carefully one by one and observe them. In the first sentence, Mara il adi moj neloa, which means the feather of the peacock looks very beautiful. Here, Mara il, which means the feather of the peacock, adi, which means very, moj, which means beautiful, nyal, which means look, or a is the present indefinite tense marker. In the second sentence, ut chedea hoto jilinya, which means the throat of the ostrich is long. Here, ut chede, which means ostrich, ui is a glide that appears for the combination of a plus a, and a is of. It possessed hoto, and hoto, which means throat, jiling, which means long, and a is the finite verb marker. In the sentence, the finite verb is jilinya. In the third sentence, kurida rama adilasera, which means the talon of the eagle is very sharp. Here, kurid, which means eagle, a means of. It is possessed rama, and rama, which means talon, adi, which means very, laser, which means sharp. A is the finite verb marker. In the sentence, the finite verb is lasera. Now we learned about the action of animals and birds. Those are up, which means perch, burum, which means lay down, Obor means lay down. Udag, which means fly. And pagud, which means chew. Now, let us make some sentences with the action of animals and birds. Chere der ab akana, which means the bird has perched on the branch of the tree. Gai goda reko burumakana, which means the cows have lain down in the cow shit. Merom ko pagudada, which means the goats are chewing. Now look at these sentences carefully one by one and observe them. In the first sentence, Chere derre ko abakana, which means the bird has perched on the branch of the tree. Here's Chere, which means bird. Der, which means branch of the tree. Re, which means on. Ui is the subject marker of Chere. Ab, which means perch. And akana is the present perfect tense marker. So, ab akana, which means perched. In the second sentence, gai goda reko burumakana, which means the cows have lain down in the cow shed. Here's gai, which means cow. Goda, which means cow shed. Re, which means in. Ko is the subject marker of gai. Burum means lay down. And akana is the present perfect tense marker. So, burum akana, which means laying down. In the third sentence, merom ko pagudada, which means the goats are chewing. Here's merom, which means goat. Ko is the subject marker of merom. Pagud, which means chew. And eda is the present continuous tense marker. So, pagudada, which means chewing. So, we have come to end of today's class. I hope this lesson was insightful for you. We will meet in the next class with a fresh and interesting lesson. Till then, keep practicing and take care.